Hey everyone, Pocky here with another Tavern Talk, and today I want to talk about Divine Shields. Divine Shields have been in the game since the start, and they've always been a super important part, a key component of the mech tribe. Selfless Hero's been around. We started out in the original Battlegrounds. Righteous Protector was a super important card and a great tech to use. We had cards like Illustra and Megasaur sort of move in and out. Holy Mackerel was one of the strongest cards, ever put in the game, especially combined with a Megasaur. And so I wanted to talk about the state of Divine Shields in our game right now, in the meta, and what I think is good about them and what is potential issues. There's now buddies, and buddies are a really important factor in the meta. Heroes are sort of predicated around playing for your buddies. People will play for tempo because you can't really miss out on your buddy. The opportunity cost is too high, right? And so one of the things that I've noticed recently that has been sort of an issue is our good friend Upbot here, which, if you look at Upbot, it's a one drop that is just insanely strong, because of how it impacts the buddy meter. If your opponent has a Upbot, when you pop the shield, you do increment your buddy meter, but it only increments it as if you did 1 damage. And because the buddy meter is so predicated on how much damage you do to your opponent's minions, so what that means is if your minions have high attack, that progresses your buddy meter a lot. Low attack minions, for instance, Alley Cat 1 attack minions generally don't progress your buddy meter very much at all. When you pop a shield, it's acting as basically 1 attack. The 1 damage that you're doing to your opponent's units. Because of the nature of how shields work, what that means is if your opponent has some Upbots, if you have high attack minions that should progress your buddy meter a lot, if they happen to attack into the Upbots, you end up not getting a lot of buddy meter at all. And that makes a really big difference. Recently I've seen a lot of people getting stuck at like 95%, 97%, even 99% on their buddy meter. And many of those times it's because there's a Upbot, right? Because people are playing to get their buddy on time, and the things that will stop them are usually things out of their control, like Upbot or bad hits, or the fact that like maybe an opponent leveled and they didn't have enough units for you to attack into, something like that. But it's usually something outside of the player's control that is preventing you from getting the buddy on time. Not always, sometimes you're taking an aggressive line yourself or something like that, but in a lot of cases it is. And so that's where we see some struggles with Upbot. Now the other aspect of Divine Shields right now in the meta that is becoming very meta defining is its interaction with poison, right? Because Battlegrounds, we talked about this in our poison discussion, because Battlegrounds is sort of predicated on this rock paper scissors idea. Poison will be stats. Shields can sort of nullify poison because it defends against it, and it makes shields really important because of how sort of power crept stats have been. It's taken a lot of the death rattle stuff out, and so our winning boards mainly consist of Divine Shields now, because you need to be able to beat poisons, and so you either are going to have poisons with Divine Shields or stats with Divine Shields, right? But at the end of the day, you want Divine Shields, or You want to nullify divine shields and then still win shields really realistically, right? So that's where Selfless Hero comes up, right? Selfless Hero is one of the stalwarts in Battlegrounds. It used to be on tier 1, and it was so strong and so influential that when Spore was introduced, people were playing into that Divine Shield poison comp too often. Spore got moved to 5. Selfless Hero got moved to tier 2. We look at, Holy Mackerel. A lot of people have thought, because of what we saw with Megasaur and Holy Mackerel, creating sort of that infinite triggering Divine Shield strategy, people thought that Holy Mackerel would be broken, and we're kind of in disbelief that they would reintroduce us, especially on mechs. Obviously, it's not as good as a Murloc that can get poison, but it's still really, really good. You can, get its shield with Annoya module. You can taunt them so you can get that ping pong going. And mechs aren't super hard to buff. It can be more difficult than some of the other tribes or types, relatively, but you can get mechs strong. And so people thought this would be a problem. Why wasn't it? Well, big part of the reason why it wasn't was Prester's Pyrospawn. Prester's Pyrospawn is, to a lot of players, considered a problematic card. Some people look at it as a tech card. The problem is that in many instances, it completely destroys shields, and there's not very much counterplay to it, right? A lot of times, if someone plays like a Ghoul, right, which is a tech card, you can play around it. Spore is really, in essence, a tech card. Usually, you can play around it. Zap, a tech card, you can play around it. Pressers is very difficult to play around because everything is happening on your opponent's terms, right? If your opponent has pressers, when the dragon attacks, it will hit the shield and then get the attack off, right? So it nullifies that shield advantage, which is so important in our late game scenarios. Now, that wouldn't seem to be as much of a problem if dragons didn't have a lot of scaling and the ability to get shields on their own, right? So one of the reasons why dragons are so strong right now, and one of the only minion types that can compete with Murlocs, is because they have access to shields via Nadina, right? And scaling via Galagos. So you have high levels of scaling with Galagos. If you can, get to the Cali setup early, you get shields across all your minions with Nadina. You can use Nadina in tandem with Prester's Pyrospawn or Ghoul to win that shield advantage and, just win trades in the late game. It makes it really potent. The other problem with Prester's, and this is, one of the big issues that people have with it, is that it's not only with dragons that is playable, because Amalgadon is a card. Amalgadon can hit poison, you can get its shield, and if you set it up with that Prester's, it becomes really, really difficult to win, even if you have Divine Shield poisons yourself, because things come down to who attacks first. Because then once you get that tempo, once you get that cadence, right, of attacking first, you're going to trade more effectively because you're getting value from your shields when they attack into your opponent's taunted Divine Shield poisons, and the other player doesn't get that unless they have a Prester's Pyrospawn of their own. That's sort of where people are starting to have issues with, Amalgadon, with Prester's. It's creating these late game scenarios where shields become so important because of how everything else has progressed, right? Like, shields in the past were countered by death rattles, right? If you played like a Mama Bear comp, or something like that, or even like a juggler comp, like that would beat shields, right? That would beat shields, that would beat divine shield poison. They didn't have enough health, like that token type build would beat those comps. With stats being as strong and prevalent as they are, with it being very possible to get Amalgadon itself to a very high stat total, you're not losing to juggler, you're not losing to Mama Bear and some rat packs. The one exception that I will mention is that you can lose to the leapers, right? To leapfrog comp, because that does have the potential, if you get the right hits, to sort of exponentially scale. And then you have the scaling combined with the death rattles that does allow you to beat the shields, right? Because it's all about the trading. And so shields basically have become so prevalent because the counters to shields aren't there. And the problem is that pressers is one of those counters, but it plays into the existence of Amalgadon in that sort of end game board state that we're used to, right? So I guess the ways to address this, I think, is to potentially, buff the things that aren't shields, or they counter shields. And then the other thing is to maybe rework some of the minions that have shields, and maybe tone down some of the stuff, because again, shields aren't nearly as important. They're still important. They will always be important, but they're not nearly as important if they're not necessary to win games. And right now they are necessary to win games, because if you don't have them, you're not going to be able to trade, because poison is so prevalent, like we talked about in our last discussion. Stats are too big, which is sort of what necessitates the prolific existence of poison. And even if you are playing stats into stats, shield advantage gives you better trades, unless someone just absolutely outscales you, which is very difficult because of how fast so many different things are scaling, right? If someone scales all their minions to hundreds to trade with shields, you have to get it over 200s, right? Effectively. And that's really difficult to outscale someone that much in the late game. Possible, but difficult. So one of the things would be maybe reworking poisons, right? Reworking shields. Something like that, right? Maybe there's not a divine shield, but a shield that makes a minion immune to poison, but not stats. Right? And then you're not having issues with the buddy meter. The buddy meter could probably be adjusted to give a little bit more reward for popping a shield. I think with the mechanics set up like they are, that's difficult, but I don't know the back end, so I can't really comment on that. But I think that shields in the early game are an issue because of how impactful it is to the buddy meter and how important buddies are to the meta right now. And then, outside of something like that, you could also have like armor that reduces, how much attack you're taking or something like that. And maybe that allows the different stats to play into each other a little bit more and have a little bit more interplay. Because at the end of the day, what everyone wants is, to have options, to be able to win, right? One of the things that was nice, even if you didn't like the whole Brand Khadgar Megasaur meta, is that basically you always had an opportunity to win because you could get to that late game. And in some instances in our meta, it isn't really possible to win. And that doesn't feel good, right? There's not like a comeback mechanic. So if you add more text and more counterplay that's viable, and interactive, right? So not like Presters where if your opponent gets it or you get it, it can just like swing the game. And there's not really a way to play around it, right? You want it to be interplay both ways, right? If someone plays a ghoul, you put a reset in front of your deflectos. You know, if someone has a cleave, you play around cleave. If someone has zap, you try and buff up, you know, say your Baron or something like that, right? These are all good aspects to the game, and so I think shields need a little bit more interactive counterplay. Presters maybe needs to be reworked or removed or not work with Amalgadon or something, right? There's probably something to be done there, because you know, if you think about it, something like Mackerel not even being like that dominant of a force simply because of the existence of Presters is pretty crazy when you think about it. So yeah, what are you guys' thoughts on shields and the meta and sort of how it's all playing together? What do you think would be a good solution to sort of, you know, spruce up the Battlegrounds gameplay that we see now? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Be sure to tune into our Twitch stream, Pocky Plays, and be sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace.